It was late September of 2009 when I decided to take that trail behind Miller's Ridge. I was 19, restless, and the kind of stupid that only comes with being young and sure nothing bad can really happen to you. Folks in town always warned about that path, said it was off limits since the late 80s, though no one could ever tell me exactly why. The old sign nailed to a leaning pine read, "Trail closed, danger beyond this point." The paint chipped and the letters faded to near ghosts. Most people said it was because of landslides or a busted bridge further in, but I'd heard other stories too, quiet ones whispered after dark. A hunter who never came back. A group of high school kids who went up there on a dare and came home days later with no memory of where they'd been. But back then, I didn't believe in that sort of thing. So one evening, just before sunset, I parked my old Ford by the ridge and decided to see what all the fuss was about. The air had that heavy stillness that comes before rain, and the woods looked darker than they should have at that hour. I remember stepping past that sign and feeling something in my chest tighten, like I just crossed a line I wasn't supposed to. The trail started out clear, packed dirt, old wooden markers, the smell of pine and damp moss. But the deeper I went, the quieter it got. The crickets stopped first, then the birds. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. It was so still that the sound of my boots crunching dead leaves felt intrusive. Like I was interrupting something ancient and patient. About half an hour in, I noticed a strange rhythm echoing through the trees. Faint at first, tap, tap, tap like someone knocking on wood far off in the distance. I figured it was just branches swaying or maybe a woodpecker, though it didn't sound quite right. It wasn't random. The pattern had a kind of deliberation to it, steady, slow, and almost human. I stopped walking and listened. The knocking stopped too. I took another step and it came again. Tap, 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 this time closer. That's when I realized it was matching my pace. I turned around, but the trail behind me was empty. Just that heavy wall of trees and mist creeping in from the ridge. I called out, "Hello?" My voice came out smaller than I meant it to, swallowed up by the forest. No answer. Just silence, and then another knock. Closer now. Tap, 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 like something answering me. The sound was coming from deeper in the woods, off the path to my right. I stood there for what felt like minutes, waiting, listening, every instinct telling me to turn back. But curiosity, or maybe pride, kept me moving forward. The sun was nearly gone by the time I reached what looked like an old split in the trail. One side continued uphill. The other curved down toward a dry creek bed. The markers that used to guide hikers had all fallen or been pulled out of the ground. Someone, or something, had carved new symbols into the bark of nearby trees. Circles intersected by crooked lines, almost like eyes. I ran my hand over one, and the wood was still damp as if freshly cut. That's when I heard it again, this time not knocking, but a low creaking sound, like a door opening in the distance. I don't know why, but it chilled me to the bone. There were no houses out there, not for miles. I told myself it was probably an old hunting shack and kept going. The trail narrowed, and the air grew colder. My flashlight, a cheap one from the gas station, started flickering. Every time the beam went out, I swore I saw movement between the trees, just shapes, tall and still, blending into the dark. The knocking came again, now behind me. I turned fast, the light swinging wildly, but there was nothing there. No wind, no animals, just me and that noise that seemed to know where I was. I picked up the pace, heart pounding. The knocking matched me step for step. I walked faster. It did too. Then I broke into a jog, breath catching in my throat. That's when it stopped altogether. For a second, I thought it was over, until I heard something else. Whispering, faint, overlapping voices drifting through the trees. I couldn't make out words, just the tone, pleading, desperate, like someone calling for help from very far away. I turned in a circle, flashlight trembling in my hand, trying to find where it was coming from. Every direction sounded the same. I don't know what made me look down, but when I did, I saw fresh footprints in the dirt beside mine. Bare footprints. The prints were small, childlike almost, but the stride was long, unnatural. They hadn't been there before. I knelt down to touch one, and the soil was wet, though the ground around it was dry. That's when my light flickered again, and in that brief strobe of shadow and glow, I saw something standing at the edge of the path ahead. A figure. It wasn't moving. Just standing perfectly still, half hidden behind a tree. I called out again, voice shaking. Hey, you okay out here? No answer. I raised the light, but the beam caught only the side of its head. Pale, too pale. Its face looked wrong, like it had been smoothed over. I blinked and it was gone, just vanished into the dark. The whispering grew louder now, circling me, coming from every direction. Panic hit hard, and I turned back the way I came. But the path was different. The trees looked closer together, and those carved symbols were everywhere now, glowing faintly like they'd been burned into the bark. I ran. Branches scraped my arms, roots snagged my boots, and the forest seemed to fold in on itself. I don't know how long I ran, minutes, maybe hours, but when I finally stopped, gasping for breath, the trail was gone. I was standing in a small clearing surrounded by trees so thick I couldn't see the sky. In the center was an old wooden post, half rotted and covered in moss. Nailed to it was another sign, the same as before. Trail closed, danger beyond this point. Except this one was new. The wood was clean, the paint fresh, and below the warning, someone had added words in red, "You shouldn't have come back." That was when the knocking started again, right behind me this time, so close it felt like it was inside my chest. I spun around, but nothing was there, just the sound, echoing from everywhere at once. I backed up, tripping over roots, flashlight falling from my hand. The beam rolled across the ground and landed on the trunk of a nearby tree. And that's when I saw them. Dozens of handprints pressed into the bark, each one carved deep, each one different sizes. Some small, some large, all of them facing inward toward me. I don't remember much after that. I think I blacked out for a while because the next thing I knew, it was dawn. The forest looked normal again, quiet, still, but not oppressive like before. My flashlight was dead, my phone had no service, and somehow the trail was right in front of me again, clear as day. I walked out without stopping, not even looking back once. When I got to my truck, the sign by the ridge caught my eye again. It looked older now, like it had always been there. But I swear to this day the bottom corner had something new scratched into the wood, tiny, shallow letters that spelled my name. I don't tell people about that part, not anymore, because sometimes when the woods get real quiet at night and the wind stops just long enough for the world to hold its breath, I still hear it. That slow, steady knock coming from somewhere far off, tapping against the hollow heart of the trees, waiting, and I know it remembers me. It was the summer of 1998, one of those humid Appalachian summers that stuck to your skin like syrup and made the air itself feel heavy. I was 16, restless, and more than a little defiant. My grandfather had raised me on a small stretch of land near the Elk River, a quiet place surrounded by thick woods and old memories. He was a man who didn't talk much, but when he did, you listened. And he'd always told me one thing above all else: never go down to the river after dark. Folks hear voices out there, he'd say, sitting on the porch as the sun dipped low, and sometimes the river answers back. I used to laugh at that, thinking it was just one of his mountain superstitions, the kind of stories old men tell to keep kids close to home. But that night, the one when I finally decided to ignore him, I learned that some stories aren't warnings, they're memories. It had been unbearably hot all day, and even as the sun set, the air didn't cool. The crickets buzzed louder than usual, and lightning bugs blinked lazily over the grass. I couldn't sleep, so I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake my grandfather, and walked barefoot down the dirt path behind the barn. The moon was bright enough to see without a flashlight, painting everything in that pale blue light that makes the world look almost dreamlike. I remember thinking how quiet it was, how the usual sound of frogs and night birds seemed distant. The closer I got to the river, the thicker the air became, like walking through invisible threads that wanted to pull me back. When I reached the riverbank, it looked almost peaceful. The surface of the water was so still it reflected the moon perfectly, like glass. I sat down on a flat rock, dipped my feet into the cool water, and just listened. There was something hypnotic about the gentle current. I remember closing my eyes and thinking how silly all those warnings were. For a few minutes it was calm. Then I heard it, a faint whisper. It was so soft I thought it might have been the wind, but the trees weren't moving. Then I heard it again, clearer this time. It said my name. It wasn't playful or curious. It sounded pleading, like someone saying my name through tears, begging me to answer. My first thought was that someone from town was messing with me, maybe one of the neighbors who liked to fish at night. I stood up, scanning the opposite bank, but there was no one there. Just the trees, dark and unmoving. The whisper came again, closer now, but from the water. The sound wasn't carried over it. It came from inside it. I took a step back, heart thudding. The water rippled, though the air around me was still. That's when I saw the footprints. Wet ones forming in the mud beside me, one by one. Small at first, then growing larger, as if whoever, or whatever it was coming closer, walking up from the river itself. They stopped just a few inches from my bare feet. I froze. The whisper came again, right in front of me now. So close I felt it against my ear. "You shouldn't have come back." The words weren't angry. They were mournful. I stumbled backward, tripping over a root and landing hard. Mud splattered my legs and I scrambled to my feet, running up the path toward the house. The whisper followed me, echoing through the trees, not loud but steady, always just behind me. When I finally burst through the back door, I slammed it shut and pressed my back against it, gasping. The house was dark except for the faint glow of the oil lamp in my grandfather's room. He was standing there in the doorway looking at me, not surprised, not angry, just sad. His eyes met mine and he said quietly, "Now it knows you." I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake listening to the sounds outside, the creak of the porch boards, the distant rush of the river, and faintly, the soft tap of something brushing against the side of the house. By morning, the air smelled different, like rain and something sour, like rotting leaves. My grandfather didn't say much during breakfast. He just told me to stay close that day, said the river had a long memory. A few days passed, and I tried to convince myself it had all been in my head. But then small things started happening. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of dripping water, even though the roof didn't leak. My shoes would be damp in the morning, though I hadn't left them outside. Once I found mud on the windowsill on the inside. My grandfather started keeping the windows locked and salt along the thresholds. He told me never to go outside after dark again, no matter what I heard. One evening, I caught him sitting by the window, staring toward the woods with his old shotgun across his lap. I asked him what he was waiting for, and he said, "The river don't like to lose what it's claimed." I didn't understand what he meant then, but I do now. That night, I woke up to a faint sound, dripping again, but slower, heavier. I turned my head toward the window, and the curtain was moving, though the glass was shut. When I pulled it back, I saw a wet handprint pressed against the pane. Smaller than mine. The shape looked wrong, the fingers too long, and the palm stretched thin like the skin was sliding off. I screamed, and my grandfather was in the room in seconds, pulling me away and closing the curtains. He didn't even look surprised. He just said, "Don't answer it. No matter what it says, don't you answer." The next few nights blurred together. The whispers didn't stop. Sometimes they came from outside the window, sometimes from the floorboards, sometimes from the walls. Always my name. Always that same pleading tone, like someone calling for help. Once I thought I heard my mother's voice, the one I hadn't heard since she drowned when I was 8. I almost called back, almost opened the door. But something in me stopped. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was instinct. Then one night everything went quiet. Too quiet. No frogs, no wind, not even the hum of insects. I sat up in bed, and that's when I heard it again, the whisper. But this time it wasn't outside. It was behind me. I turned slowly, and there in the far corner of the room stood a figure. I couldn't see its face, just a dripping silhouette, darker than the dark around it. Water pooled at its feet, spreading across the floorboards. My voice caught in my throat. The figure tilted its head like it was studying me, and then, in a voice barely more than breath, it said, "Come back." Before I could move, my grandfather burst through the door. The figure vanished like smoke in the wind. He didn't yell or ask questions. He just held my shoulders and said, "You need to leave tomorrow. Stay with your aunt up north. The river don't forget." I left the next morning before sunrise. He stayed behind. 2 weeks later, they found him down by the riverbank. The sheriff said it looked like he'd gone out at night and slipped, drowned most likely, but I knew better. His boots were sitting neatly by the porch, his gun by the door. They said the current must have carried him downstream, but they never found his body. I went back for his funeral that fall. The woods looked the same, but the river felt different, restless, louder. I stood on the bank staring at the water, and for a moment, I thought I saw something move just beneath the surface. Something pale reaching up. I turned and walked away before I could see more. Now, years later, I live miles from any river. But sometimes when the nights are still and the air gets thick with humidity, I swear I can hear it again. The whisper, soft and pleading, carried on the wind. It still knows my name. And some nights when I dream, I wake to find my feet wet, mud drying in the shape of footprints I don't remember making. I started that delivery job back in 2011 right after my divorce. It wasn't glamorous work, but it kept me moving, kept my head clear. I take late-night routes through backroads most people in town didn't even know existed. I like the quiet, just me, the hum of the engine, and the long, dark stretch of mountain road ahead. But there was one route I never meant to take, Old Birch Road. Everyone in the depot had a story about it. They said it used to be the main road before the new highway was built. But ever since that landslide in the late 80s, folks avoided it. Too many accidents, too many disappearances. The other drivers warned me. Don't go down Birch after midnight, they'd say. You'll see her. I laughed it off. Thought it was the kind of story that makes night shifts feel like campfire tales. I didn't laugh after that night. It was late, past 1 in the morning, and the rain had been coming down hard since I left Charleston. My GPS kept losing signal, rerouting me every few miles. I didn't realize until it was too late that it had put me on Old Birch. I noticed when the trees got denser, the asphalt turned to cracked gravel, and that uneasy silence replaced the sound of civilization. The rain was coming down so hard it looked like silver sheets in my headlights. My wipers squealed across the glass, barely keeping up. I remember thinking I'd turn back at the next clearing, but that's when I saw her. She was standing right in the middle of the road. A woman, maybe late 20s, barefoot, wearing what looked like a thin white dress clinging to her skin from the rain. Her hair was plastered against her face, and her eyes, wide, unblinking, locked onto mine as I hit the brakes. My truck screeched, tires sliding on the wet gravel until I stopped just feet from her. She didn't move, just stood there, arms hanging limp at her sides, like she'd been waiting. I rolled down the window, leaning out into the rain. "Hey, you okay?" I shouted. She didn't answer. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then she raised one arm and pointed toward the tree line, slowly, deliberate. I followed her gesture, but all I saw was darkness, dense woods soaked in fog. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe I thought someone else was hurt out there. I put the truck in park, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped out. The second my boots hit the ground, the rain stopped. Completely. Not a drop. The air went still, the forest silent. I turned back toward the road, confused, and that's when my stomach dropped. My truck was gone. Not moved. Gone. There were still tire tracks in the mud where it had been, but they stretched into nothing, like it had just driven off into the air. My pulse started to pound. I looked at the woman again. She was still standing there, only now she was smiling. I called out again, my voice breaking. "Where's my truck? What's going on?" She tilted her head, that smile not reaching her eyes, and then she pointed again, to the woods. This time I heard something, a faint creaking sound like wood bending under weight. Then came the whispering. It wasn't one voice, it was many, overlapping, all speaking too quietly to make out words. It came from the trees. I should have run. I know that now. But something in the way she looked at me, that cold stillness, held me there like I was anchored to the spot. I took a few steps toward her. "Are you hurt?" I asked. She shook her head slowly, still smiling. Then she whispered so softly I almost missed it. "You shouldn't have stopped." My throat went dry. "What do you mean?" I asked. But before I could finish, I heard movement, branches snapping deep in the woods. I turned the flashlight toward the sound. Between the trees, shapes moved. Dozens of them. At first I thought they were people, but their movements were wrong. Too slow, too synchronized. I took a step back, shining the light higher, and that's when I saw their faces, or rather, the lack of them. Pale skin stretched smooth where eyes and mouth should have been. The woman took a step toward me, barefoot on the wet gravel, her head tilted in that same unnatural way. "You shouldn't have stopped," she said again, louder this time, her voice trembling, almost mocking. I stumbled backward, the beam of my flashlight shaking wildly. Behind her, the figures in the woods had stopped moving. All of them. They just stood there, facing me, motionless. Then, one by one, they started stepping out from the tree line. The sound of their feet slapping against the wet road echoed in the stillness. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I turned and ran. The gravel slipped beneath my boots, the fog thickening so fast it felt alive. I didn't know where I was going, just away. I ran until my lungs burned and my flashlight started to fade. When I finally stopped, I found myself at a bend in the road I didn't recognize. The air was different here, lighter somehow, and when I turned around, the fog was gone. I was alone. My truck was sitting there on the shoulder, lights still on, engine idling like it had never moved. I climbed in, slamming the door, locking it out of instinct. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely shift into drive. I didn't look back once as I drove. The rain started again halfway down the road, sudden and heavy, but I didn't care. I just kept driving until I hit the main highway. When I got back to the depot, the guy on night shift looked surprised to see me. "Thought you weren't taking Birch," he said. I told him my GPS rerouted. His face went pale. "Yeah," he muttered. "It does that sometimes. You're lucky you came back." I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to know. For weeks after that, I couldn't sleep right. I kept seeing her in my dreams, standing in the middle of that road, rain pouring down, pointing toward the woods. Sometimes in those dreams, I'd follow her. Sometimes I'd see the faces of the others, blank, silent, waiting. The worst part is, I'd wake up to find the sound of rain outside, even when the forecast said clear skies. Once, I looked out my apartment window and parked across the street under the streetlight was a white delivery truck. My truck, engine off, lights on. I quit the job not long after. Sold the truck, moved towns, tried to put it all behind me. But even now, years later, I can't drive at night without watching the edge of the road, waiting for her to appear. Sometimes when it rains, my radio cuts out for a second, and through the static, I swear I can hear her voice again, soft, distant, and pleading. And every time I do, I remember the way she smiled that night on Old Birch Road, just before everything went wrong. They say she only appears to the ones who ignore the warnings. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I get the feeling it's not just her out there anymore. Like maybe I left a part of myself on that road. Or maybe, just maybe, something else followed me home.